Types of tape and their most common applications.
So we're going to discuss rigid tape, elastic adhesive bandage, otherwise known as EAB, hand tearable elastic bandage, and we're going to finish off this section with cohesive. So to get started, let's have a look at rigid tape, also known sometimes as zinc oxide or non-stretch. So rigid comes in 4 sizes normally. 50mm. So the 50mm tape is used primarily for the larger joints on larger athletes. So I'd be using 50mm on big ankles, shoulders, knees. The most common and versatile tape size there is the 38mm tape. So 38mm tape can be used on basically most joints, so ankles, shoulders, knees. So if you're in a small local sports club and you can't afford all these different tape sizes, just getting the 38mm tape is going to be the most versatile for you and suit all your needs. And I'll discuss other ways to use the 38mm in a club situation when we talk about taping on a budget in another video. 25mm tape. This is used. It can be used in some specialised foot taping. It can be used to restrict the movement of the thumb and also to buddy tape fingers together. Now these uses are by no means exhaustive. These are just the most common uses that we can use these tapes for. The 13mm tape, very, very narrow tape as you can see. And this is usually used just for those small joints like knuckles. It can also be used to reinforce other taping, like say to reinforce the taping of a thumb and also to lock other taping down. Okay, so moving on to elastic adhesive bandage, otherwise known as EAB, or stretch bandage. And this comes in various sizes from 100mm, 75mm, 50mm and 25mm. Now the amount of stretch and quality will vary greatly from brand to brand and even type to type. So this is this particular weave has quite a lot of stretch. This weave here even has more stretch. This is very, very stretchy, this particular weave. Whereas this weave here doesn't give a lot of stretch at all. So what are the best uses for elastic bandage? Because of its stretch, we don't use it for situations where we have to restrict movement. Although sometimes it's good just to use to give a little bit of support to an area. I also like to use it as an overwrap. So after I've, say, strapped a shoulder, I'll use an EAB tape just to give that little bit of extra softer support. And also helps to hold down the rigid tape that we've used for the shoulder. Another very good use for EAB tape is to use as anchors around limbs. So instead of using a rigid tape to wrap right around a limb when you're taping an elbow or a knee or something like that, we can actually use the stretch tape to go right around the limb, so we're not going to restrict circulation. Now the other thing to consider is the amount of stretch and what you're doing. Now stretch tape can be used also to hold dressings on. So as you know, like if somebody's running around on a field, just putting a band-aid over a cut or an abrasion isn't going to last too long if they're going to be rolling around on the grass and sweating and everything else. So we use this nice stretch tape to hold pads and dressings in place during sport. But as you can see, there's a lot of variation in the amount of stretch. So for example, if I was going to use a 25mm EAB tape to tape a thumb, which we will demonstrate in a future video in this course, I would prefer to use a bandage that has less stretch and more support. So we're going to be able to restrict the movement of the thumb and at the same time support it. So once again, tape selection is important. Okay, let's have a look at hand terrible stretch. Now, I really love hand terrible stretch. It's probably one of the most versatile tapes in my kit. It's because it's very, very light. So it's got a lot of stretch there, so you do have to be careful when you're wrapping around a limb so that you don't cut off circulation, but it's got a lot of stretch, and it's very, very fine. It's very, very thin. So in the case of an injury, we can use this tape to compress the area, which is obviously part of the injury management. And because it's so fine, they can still ice through it, so they can keep the compression on, and they can whack the ice on over the top, and so they can still do their icing. The other thing, because it's so thin, like the EAB does conform to the contours of the body, but this one just hugs the contours of the body. It just goes around everything so well. I like to use this as an underwrap. So if somebody is allergic to tape, I will use this type of tape first as an underwrap to go down onto the skin, because it's sticky. It will stick to the skin, and then I will use the rigid tape over the top. I can also use this as an overwrap, and because it's very, very highly absorbent, it's used to cover up blood. So any sort of bleeding wound during competition, you can wrap this around and it will absorb the blood. And why they call it hand terrible, because simply you don't need scissors. You can just rip a piece, so you can wrap around, rip, and then lock it down. In fact, here's a picture of my own calf from earlier this week, where I went for a run and had a little bit of an accident and had a slight tear. So after sticking some dry needles in, I compressed it with this type of tape, and as you can see, I've locked it off with the rigid tape. Once again, this tape comes in various sizes from 75, 50, and 25. Cohesive. What a strange monster this is. This tape is ideal for holding on splints or other things where you don't actually want it to stick. It's crazy. It only sticks to itself, so it won't stick to your skin, and once again, it's very stretchy, so it can be used to compress injuries, and it's waterproof. It's also very expensive, so if you're in a small local club environment, there are other options, as I've just discussed, that can work just as well. But that is the cohesive bandage. And those are the 4 types of tapes that we use most commonly in sports taping. So to just recap, we've got rigid, EAB, hand terrible stretch, and cohesive. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.